Alright guys, today's video I'm going to go over what are the basics of geometry. So I attached this worksheet and I'm going to go over little pieces of it, and I'm not saying you have to do this worksheet. I'm just going to say these are going to kind of be some of the ideas from the worksheet that we're going to go over. I'm feeling that next week we'll start going over each little piece. Some of it's going to be really easy. Some of us you should already know, or at least have a general idea about. And then some will be might be brand new stuff. So basics of geometry. So on this worksheet, the first thing that we see, right, is we see some stuff that says use a ruler to measure. So what we're going to call that, right, is we're just going to say that these are line segments. So we're going to say that is a line segment. So we're going to call that a line segment. So the first thing that we're going to see is the first basic of geometry. We're going to call it line segments and their measures. That one would be, I think everybody could do that one already. If I gave you a ruler, I bet you can measure that. Right? That's a basic of geometry. All right? Going forward, the next idea would be about segments and segment addition. So basically, we'll say the basic idea would be the segment addition postulate. Now, basically all that's saying is that if you have pieces tied together, so if I made this blue right here, I'll make it not blue, we'll make it a different color. If I make this green right here, this green piece and this red piece together make up the whole blue piece, right? That's the segment addition postulate, that one piece plus another piece, if they're on the same segment, they make up an entire piece, right? They can be, the lengths can be combined. So that's the segment addition postulate, right? So that's the second main idea we're going to talk about. All right, pretty simple stuff too. That makes sense, I think. All right, now the next thing we're going to talk about, if you look at 9 through 12 on this worksheet, 9 through 12 is about draw an angle to measurement. So I bet the next idea is going to be about angles and their measures. Now, you might not have had something, you might just have draw an angle. That would be a totally acceptable answer. Your answers do not have to be the exact same as mine. They just have to be kind of similar. And that's all that's talking about. So I bet here we just learn how to draw an angle, right? And then the idea is going to be angles and their measures. The next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to be talking about classifying angles. So classifying angles, that's going to be the next big idea. So right now we're at 4 ideas for this worksheet, and you're going to be talking about acute, obtuse, right, or straight. So there's going to be, and most of us will probably understand acute, obtuse, or right, and we'll even understand straight too. So that's probably all something you've done before. That's why it's a basic of geometry. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is how to name an angle. So basically the idea there would be, it'd probably be basic angle terminology. So basic things about angles. What are like vertices, how are angles made up, what type of angles there are. And 4 and 5 kind of go together. So it's not a big deal if you only had like one of those. So basically the 5th thing we're talking about is basic angle terminology. That's like 17 through 20. And I'll kind of go through this at the end of what numbers are kind of what ideas. So basically we're just looking at this worksheet, figuring out what angles or what ideas are going to follow around with each angle. That's all we're doing. We're not trying to do the worksheet yet. We're just trying to basically survey it, do a little bit of pre-lesson activity, and determine what type of stuff we're going to have to know. So 21 through 24, that's kind of like the segment addition part from earlier. Like notice I have this green angle, right? This green part right there. And if I add it to, let's say, this yellow part, right, together, it's going to make up this big blue angle, right? So that's going to be called the angle addition postulate. That's the idea. All right, next idea we're going to talk about are angle relationships, right? So angle relationships are kind of our next idea. That's just saying how angles work together, right? For example, we're going to talk about all these, like look at all these complementary. That's like, we'll find out those are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. Linear pair, that's two angles that form a line. Vertical, that's like two angles that are across from each other. Adjacent, angles next to each other. Alternate interior corresponding and alternate exterior end up dealing with two parallel lines cut by a transversal. We'll deal a lot with that. So these are all basic ideas all under this kind of umbrella of angle relationships. By the way, the key word is calculator. The key word is calculator. It is kind of math related, but it's not really relating to what we're doing right now because we're not using a calculator. So the key word is calculator. All right, the last idea we're going to talk about, if you look at 29 through 32, those are geometric diagrams and notation, basically how to write stuff in geometry. So geometry has a lot of stuff that it really only that means something just by looking at it. We're going to look at figures or pictures, and then you're going to see things, and that's going to help you. So we're going to call it geometric diagrams and notation. So basically, guys, like this is important because we'll find out that that means those angles are congruent, right? A lot of time, if you don't understand notation or how to read a diagram, you're not going to understand what information is being given to you. Like without being told anything, I know that those two lines are parallel to each other because that's what that little notation means. I know that this guy's a right angle. I know that that is congruent to that. That means congruent segments. So there's going to be things that we need to know on how to write and notate in geometry. It's going to can be kind of important. Those are pretty much the 8 basic ideas that we could talk about in geometry. All right, so just to clarify, if you look at your worksheet that we're going to be doing next week, line segments and their measures, that was numbers 1 through 4. The segment addition postulate was numbers 5 through 8 on your worksheet that we're going to be getting next week. 9 through 12 is going to be about angles and their measures. 13 through 16, that's going to be about basic angle terminology. It was probably for 17 through 20. The angle addition postulate is 21 through 24. 25 through 28 is angle relationships. That was sort of like talking about linear pairs, vertical, blah, blah, blah. And then the last ones, 29 through 32, those are the numbers that talk about geometric diagrams and notation. So these are the basics of geometry. We're going to talk about them. A lot of it hopefully is reviewed that you saw like in middle school. But if not, we're going to kind of go over it. We'll start working on that worksheet. You'll probably get it in class next time I see you. You'll probably have a week to finish it. And in the meantime, I'll be giving you very similar problems like your worksheet on Firestarters. So that's kind of the plan going forward.